What's going on, guys? Joe Holka here, analyst at Fantasy Labs and the Action Network. Definitely recommend you guys check out all the tools and premium content that we have going on over there. Per usual, both links are in the description below. And while you're at it, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and also the notification bell so that you're notified on Sunday mornings when we start the live show before kickoff. But today, week 4 is come and gone. If you know me, you're probably aware that I primarily play tournaments at the mid to high stakes in NFL, but specifically target some of these smaller fields, and I'm rolling out a pretty high percentage of my overall action on just one or a small amount of lineups every week. So today we're going to take a look back at the 1060 on DraftKings, again, the game changer. Only 50 people in this field size and 15K up top. Pretty flat payout structure, 20% of the field getting paid, so the top 10 spots are getting paid out. Yeah, I just want to kind of fly through my content at the end per usual, just trying to stay accountable, some of the decisions I'm making, and then talking about in the industry throughout the week. But let's jump right into it. Let's start actually in 6th place with Empire Maker's team. Talked about Empire Maker a couple weeks ago. Seems like he's almost always in the top half of this tournament at least, cashing it more often than not. So this team was actually a 2v2 from my starting point most of Sunday morning, except I had Barkley instead of Zeke, and then I also had the Indy defense instead of the Bears at one point. But really like some of the decisions he made here, per usual. One of the names finishing high in this tournament, so not surprising at all. He went with the Breeze Kamara stack, brought it back with Shepard. Breeze at 12%. Now, I'll talk about that in a little bit, but I thought that was a little bit surprising considering that he was only 6,600. That's one thing that we're kind of having to adapt to this year is it wasn't that long ago where paying up at quarterback meant you were spending like 8K, and then paying down, maybe you get to like that 5K range. Now, like some of the top quarterbacks are 6,600, 7K. We had Mahomes at 7K last week, and then paying all the way down is still kind of in that 5K range. So it's really condensed. I don't mind the idea of going up to a guy like Breeze for sure. In the spot that he was in wasn't ideal, obviously, to see him taking out of a lot of the red zone work. But yeah, we'll see if that continues in the future. He did only go with Gio from the Cincinnati-Atlanta game. Gio was probably one of the first guys into every lineup I made, but I also decided to roll it back with Boyd on quite a few teams and my main team as well. In that range, he opted to go with Geronimo Allison and Taylor Gabriel. So Allison, after Randall Cobb was ruled out, obviously was probably a top 2 option in this price range, 4,700. I definitely had lineups that pivoted away from Boyd in that direction. So I thought Geronimo was sharp. 34% of the field got on that as well. The other part of this that I really liked was the Taylor Gabriel play, especially at 6%. I really wish I would have taken a longer look at Gabriel. I didn't think he would be this low, and I thought a lot of people would kind of go that direction for a little bit of upside in this GPP, but a lot of salary saving, obviously at 3,900. A guy that had been seeing some deep targets, but the majority of his value is on a PPR format like this. Obviously, a very explosive guy at 6%, the savings. I definitely think that made a lot of sense, and nice that he got the upside out of that with that play. Yeah, really a solid team all around. He's probably one of the favorites most of the morning, to be completely honest. I know he took down some of the smaller field, high buy-in stuff over on FanDuel with a very similar core. So Empire Maker, solid team, man. Good job. Yeah, moving to 2nd place now, Osimo. Totally different lineup construction from him. Honestly, shout out to Osimo. Not many people can roll out the kind of volume this guy does and have success in virtually every sport. So I always love looking at his teams. There's definitely a natural contrarian feel to them usually. And he stacked the Houston Indy game, which I loved. It was a high-paced game, kind of an undercover shootout that I was targeting, and some larger field stuff. So Watson, 18% owned at 6,300. Yeah, I thought he was a really strong play. Went with Watson, Lamar Miller, DeAndre Hopkins, brought it back with Nyheim Hines. So he actually faded Gio, something that I never really considered, to be honest, but he was able to make up with that with the Nyheim Hines play at 4%, 2 touchdowns, 9 receptions. So with a lot of people on Ebron, kind of a condensed target share with Indy, Luck not throwing the ball downfield a lot, at least going into this game. I know he took a couple of deep shots to TY in this one, but the savings you got from Nyheim Hines at 3,800 made some sense. I thought 3,800 reasonable roll in a high total game. Like, obviously, there's going to be a lot of scoring to go around if you think that game is going to be high scoring. And then you get the natural leverage kind of off Ebron. So didn't mind that at all. Even more leverage off of Ebron, Jared Cook at 2%. I was kind of on Cook, more of a FanDuel play for me. Really like the volume for his price point regardless though. So at 2%, and again, more leverage off of Ebron, who we'll talk about, that was like 50% owned. Thought that was really sharp. Yeah, so a lot of kind of nice leverage and ownership plays here across the board. Julio as well, coming off a disappointing week 3, comes back with 173 yards, 9 receptions, no touchdown per usual. But also had Mohamed Sanu at 2%. Really liked that. I actually considered Sanu because of that 3,600 price tag with guys like Gabriel. And I think it was great in a lot of ways because people are chasing that Calvin Ridley touchdowns from the week before, and a much cheaper price tag for a pretty similar role, to be completely honest. So, awesome work on this team, Awesemo. I think on a pretty high scoring week, it's impressive to see a contrarian team do so well when the chalk went kind of nuts. Speaking of the Calvin Ridley people, Robakos took this thing down, 237 points. Not a ton really to say about this team, honestly, that hasn't been said already. His big differentiator was Trey Burton at 8%, with a lot of people paying down, like I said, for Ebron. And then, we'll talk about Ezekiel Elliott in a second. He's one guy we haven't really touched on, but pretty chalky team overall. Congrats on the 15K first prize. All right, let's go down to my team, and we're going to have to go down a ways to make it there. In 42nd place, this is my team from the 1K last week. Obviously, this was not a starting point when I was kind of middle of the pack to start the day, kind of leading up to some of those night games. I did have a decent amount of flexibility. That's one thing that I wanted to accomplish that I didn't accomplish in week 3, was to give myself some more flexibility. And my way of doing that was going really heavy on this New Orleans and New York Giants game. Had a lot of chalk in the beginning of the day. Tyler Boyd, Giovanni Bernard, I mentioned they were some of my first guys in. Kamara, Bears, really chalky there. Also played Quincy Enunwa. Kind of a floor play looking back on it. Maybe wasn't the best for upside, but 4,300. I thought it was a really good price point there. In hindsight, should have gone after a guy like Gabriel or Sanu for a decent amount cheaper. Would have been able to kind of upgrade some of these other slots. But thought he was a decent floor play. Ended up with 10.6 points. Didn't really kill me, but it's tough when some of those other guys in that range that I was considering really went off. So that set this team back right away. So I knew that I had to make some swaps. The other player that I had, so I had Gio, Boyd, brought it back with Austin Hooper. Hooper probably wasn't the sharpest play at 2,900. He just opened up so much. I kept finding my way to him. We know that at tight end, it's really important to target high team totals since they're so touchdown driven. And Austin Hooper is just one of those guys that never really seems to get it done. But he always kind of is on my radar because of his cheap price tag and his involvement in the red zone. When Ebron was right there for 600 more, I believe, probably should have found a way to get there. And a way I could have done that would have been pivoting off of Enunwa to Gabriel or even Sanu in that range. So obviously if I do that, much different team with Ebron instead of Hooper and instead of Enunwa, one of those cheaper guys that did well. Maybe could have even upgraded to the Allison kind of role on one of these players as well. So a lot of regrets there. Regardless, was behind. So the biggest decision I had to make was with a lot of the ownership on Zeke. That's kind of why I was obviously behind. I knew I had Kamara coming, knew I had Saquon coming, two guys that I really liked. I liked Saquon more than Zeke, looking back at it a little bit more as today went on. I think that a lot of really sharp, higher stakes people kind of got on Zeke because of his prop on Sunday morning, so maybe going to put a little bit more emphasis on keeping an eye on those, at least looking for outliers of some of their props, something I want to keep an eye on. Really liked Saquon, though, in that range. He was a little bit more expensive than Zeke, and told myself again last week that I was going to try and get a little bit more correlation on my team. So I went with Breeze, Barkley, and then brought it back with Alvin Kamara. And then obviously instead of Ted Ginn, I had Sterling Shepard, one of the other guys that was one of my first players in on pretty much every team I made. So my big decision was, how behind am I? What kind of leverage do we have in some of these later games. Is there anyone with enough upside that can bring me back? I definitely thought that Kamara had a ton of upside, but he was going to be high owned, so that didn't really help me a ton. But I was at kind of the point where I needed raw points, and that's something that I think people need to think about. Like, we talk about late swap a lot, but it doesn't do you any good to move to low owned plays that have no like ceiling, basically, especially since some of the ownership that was gone already at quarterback. I knew that Breeze, just by looking at some of these other players, was going to be lower owned than he probably should have. So I was going to stay at Breeze, kind of committed to that, and then had to decide what I wanted to do with my running backs. Thought that kind of the OBJ route or Michael Thomas is something that I could have done in the wide receiver slot here after I got off Shepard. Had to get off Shepard, in my opinion. He was like 60% on this tournament. I don't think he had enough upside to help me pass teams. So that's where I decided to go with a lower owned play. Was in between Ted Ginn and actually Jordy Nelson for super low ownership, but went with Ginn for the correlation, 12% to 6% in this tournament when I was behind. I thought that was good. That was one of the positives, I think, of the pivot that I made. Saquon, obviously not quite as involved as I wanted him to be, had a fine game, but in hindsight, I think staying on Kamara and Breeze was fine because of how the raw points that I needed to get back, like the Ginn pivot. Yeah, maybe Saquon just in general it wasn't sharp to stay on him. I could have moved to Kamara in this slot and then maybe added a different wide receiver in this. I think if I had to do it all over again and I was behind, I probably still would have played Kamara, but I would have moved to Ted Ginn, Breeze, and another wide receiver that would have given me a little bit more leverage than Saquon did. So obviously didn't work out. As soon as Shepard scored that touchdown, the Ted Ginn play was basically moot. But yeah, I think I learned a lot as far as this team in general for this tournament size. I thought started off pretty strong, but I'm never going to be someone that doesn't late swap when I'm behind. Like I'm not trying to just cash this tournament. So like even if I would have stayed with my original team, I think that team I looked at it. I think it was somewhere in like the 188, 189 range. So like would have been like 20th place or something like that. But like I don't really care about that. Like you got to be in the top 10 to cash. All the money is pretty much up top anyway. So what's the difference between a 42nd place finish and a 20th place finish? I'm not really interested in doing that. So we'll keep plugging along here, still profitable in this tournament through 4 weeks. So can't ask for more than that. Hopefully you guys can gain something from some of these reviews, and I'll try to be better in week 5. Let's touch on something I was good at last week was the content. The content just smashed. One of the plays that I was looking at as far as leverage off of Shepard was Corey Davis. Obviously, he just went completely ham. A guy that's been popping on a lot of the air yards, whopper type stuff that I've been keeping an eye on, just hasn't really been doing it. Finally kind of paid off the truthers. Finally was a pretty good spot. Had Aaron Rodgers as well as kind of a high leverage situation. That one didn't really work out. As far as the stacks, talked about it all week, how starting your team with Mitchell Trubisky, Allen Robinson was a really strong strategy. I think in general stacking, you almost get more value in playing some of these cheaper stacks because of the correlation really goes nuts. You have so much to do with the rest of your salary that you can really pass a lot of people if you just play some really good plays. So if you played Trubisky, if you played Allen, even if you added in Gabriel to that was such an amazing start for you in this week. You could literally do whatever you wanted with your team. So I was on that idea in the beginning of the week. I didn't end up going there on my main team. Maybe some regrets there. Melvin Gordon. I liked Melvin Gordon over Zeke, and maybe that wasn't a popular take. I had Gordon and Barkley over Zeke, actually. So I'm going to have to kind of go back and look at what happened with the Zeke play. I honestly think that Zeke had a ceiling game, right? We haven't seen him be that involved in the passing game at all, really, this year. So the fact that he took one of those screen passes for like 36 yards and basically had more yards on that one play than he had receiving the entire year kind of buried the Barkley teams. But Gordon, I thought, was in that range. He ended up doing relatively well. Talked about him quite a bit in the industry last year. The other stack was mentioned how high I was on this game. Eli, Odell, Shepard, Kamara. Obviously, the Eli play didn't really work out, but Beckham for his salary kind of busted. But the idea of kind of getting Shepard and Kamara with some lower owned, at least with Eli, that was kind of the idea behind that game stack. Looking at defense and special teams, Green Bay did really well. They were the the cover boys, obviously, Jacksonville, I thought was a nice pay up to be contrarian move. And then some of the other small, like lower defenses I was looking at didn't really pan out. Philly, decent chunk of ownership there, but really Green Bay, if you just didn't get cute, especially on FanDuel when their price is really easy to get to, make it a lot of sense against this Buffalo team. So let's look at the props. Props just absolutely smashed this year, and that's all due to our props tool, Fantasy Labs. Be sure and check that out if you haven't already. And shout out to Sean Corner. His projections going into that have been absolute fire this year. 7-2 in props last week, so that's solid. Split the Thursday night game, Monday night football game, and then Thursday night also split, I believe, got both of them right on this James Conner and Juju Smith-Schuster one. Had the under on receptions there and the under on receiving yards for the main slate. The only one that I got wrong, so we had James White over, we had Josh Gordon under, we had Michael Gallup over, Matt Ryan over. So those were all pretty much smash. So Saquon Barkley, 56 receiving yards. I had under 55.5. So pretty efficient line there. Can't really be too kind of upset about that one, but 7-2 for the week, really solid as far as props. So yeah, if you guys haven't checked out the Action Network app, would definitely recommend that you guys do that. It's pretty amazing. Kind of follow your bets. Put a lot of resources into making that perfect for people that like to speculate on sports like we do. So kind of disappointing week personally in the 1K, but hopefully kind of do better in week 5. Thanks for checking out this video, guys. Again, be sure to check out Fantasy Labs and the Action Network. A lot of really awesome tools. Hockey's starting up this coming week, so things are going to change a little bit for me as far as content. Going to scale back some of these articles. Still going to be doing a lot of props, thankfully, for NFL, but going to be ramping up some NHL stuff as well. So if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and then that notification bell. Also going to have some news for how things are going to change for the live streams that I think you guys will all be really excited about. Let me know in the comments how much of a fish I was basically this week, if you like the pivots that I made when I was behind, or if you'd like to see anything different from this video in the future. And sounds good. All right, good talk, guys. I'll see you out there.